Hey guys, it's Krystal Lee Moore Lucier here, also known as your Home Sweet Home 519 Realtor. Krystal Lee Moore. This is Realtor Life, and I am so happy you're here. Today we're going to be talking about home inspections. So home inspections are so important for houses because we want to know kind of what's going on with that investment. And when I became a realtor back in 2011, there wasn't really a situation that I had known where people would not get a home inspection. It was a very standard thing. Everyone had them. And it was just something that was understood. Fast forward to kind of 2020, 2021, 2022, and home inspections kind of fell to the wayside because a firm offer with no conditions was something that a seller wanted. And if they had like 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 offers, people did whatever they could to get a house. And ultimately, I think a lot of people are regretting that now, but there wasn't anything that really could have been done because it was an insane time in the real estate market. What we always say to people is if you can get a home inspection, you should get a home inspection. But I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about what is our role as a realtor during that home inspection, before, after, all of that. And just to kind of take away some of the scariness, because when I first became a realtor, as I said, like home inspections were a thing, I had no idea what I was doing. And as someone who loves caring for people and takes it very seriously, I had a problem with that entire thing. Like, what I'm supposed to be the person that a buyer leans to when they're wondering about a home inspection, and I had never been in a home inspection. And so it was a big deal. So I actually found this book by someone who turns out, fun fact, is a colleague of mine with Royal LePage. I found that out on Saturday, actually. But Sandra Ranamato, I might be saying that wrong, she wrote this book called Property Virgins. I think there was a show as well. But this book was gold. It was like my Bible for home inspections and for first-time buyers. And it just walked people through the process of being a first-time home buyer and what they would expect and like what's a home inspection and blah, blah, blah. And this thing was perfect because it really just gave me insight into this is what it looks like. In hindsight, what I should have done is I should have been kind of going out with other realtors during a home inspection, but it wasn't something that I thought of. It wasn't something that was presented. And I would say the book is amazing. If you're not a reader, just find a colleague and say, hey, is it okay if I tag along on a home inspection? Don't say anything. Don't chip in any information during that home inspection. Just kind of be a fly on the wall and just pay attention to how things are done. But for today, we're going to be talking about what to do at that home inspection. So firstly, when you're talking to your buyers, they're going to, and you decide that you're going to be putting in an offer, they're going to be hopefully interested in a home inspection. And if they ask you if they should get one, I think usually the answer is like, it's a good idea to get one. And I've also heard of people just like kind of saying that they want the home inspection, but then maybe getting like their uncle or their brother or their dad to do the walkthrough. It can be a little bit, if your uncle or your brother or your dad misses something big, you can't really do much about it. If a home inspector misses something big, you might have a reason to go back to them. But for the most part, it is up to you. If you're buying a house, if you would like to get an inspection, and as a realtor, we would like to recommend that you do get that inspection. In fact, we actually have a form you have to sign now if you choose not to get that inspection to say that we said you should, but you are not. So when your client is saying, hey, like, should I, shouldn't I? It's a good idea to recommend some home inspectors. And either create a list of people that you know are good and have a lot of really high reviews, have a lot of experience, or ask some of the older agents in your in your office, who they use. The thing with home inspectors is that, from what I understand, it's not like you do take a course, but it's not as heavily regulated as some other industries. So you really do want to look at those reviews and do they have a lot of experience? Have people worked with them before? There can be bad experiences. There can be good experiences. I'm very lucky, I feel, because I found some really great inspectors that take care of my clients. But it's important that you give your client some choices. And also remember, like, that inspector, you're going to refer them to your client, and then you have nothing to do with that relationship. And that's very, very important. Sometimes I've had clients say, oh, like, hey, like, is this, some agents pay for an inspection? I don't think, I really think that you want an arm's length distance from, or an arm's length relationship from that inspection in the client. You want them to have their own relationship, because if you are paying the bill, I mean, hopefully the inspector would still be just as honest, but it's better if you can give the recommendation, absolutely, and you should be there at the house during the inspection if the house is listed, because it is your insurance that's allowing you guys to be in there. But I think it's important that that relationship be between the inspector and the client. And so when they actually decide that they're going to work together, so the inspector will talk with the clients, you'll meet at the house. They usually do some paperwork and sign some contracts. They explain the whole thing before you go in. And then when you do go in, like, they'll do maybe an outside walk around too. But the biggest thing that I learned early on is that you're not there to lend any expertise during that inspection. A couple reasons for that. So there's reasons that I've noticed and reasons that I've been told. The reasons I've noticed is that the inspector does not need your help. Just like if you were selling a house, you wouldn't want the inspector coming in and giving you or your clients kind of direction on pricing or what they should do. It's very frustrating if that happens. So you don't want to do the same thing to them. So don't step on their toes. Let them do their inspection. Years and years ago, when I was a brand new agent, I remember this agent in Ottawa told me, she said she was in an inspection and she was just trying to be helpful. And I guess she was like, what's that? And there was like a switch and it didn't really do anything, but by opening the switch, they had to like open the entire wall. And I guess one thing led to another and the clients walked away from the deal from what I understand, for not even a big deal, but kind of no one was happy with her chiming in and trying to show that she was part of it. So just remember, you are there. I always say to my clients, like, hey, like, don't worry. Like, I'm here, maybe for some comic relief, to chat with you if you need. I can look stuff up if you need me to look stuff up. I can take notes and pass them on, but I'm not really here to do the inspection because that's what the inspector is for. So the ultimate thing, be quiet and kind of just make sure that you are, paying attention, but also you're not the inspector. So then when the report comes, it's a good idea just to get your client on board with you getting a copy of that report. You can go through it. It's a lot more helpful. And sometimes there will be things that your client wants to have addressed. So rule of thumb, I think, is that if you can see an issue, like if you can see it and you've offered, you really shouldn't be negotiating that issue unless you kind of talked about to the agent about that. But if there's a surprise, so if you didn't realize, for example, that like the chimney was falling over, or no one knew that there was moisture coming into the attic, things like that. So those are things you can say, hey, the inspection report has this. Here are the relevant portions of the report. And could we have this? Can this be resolved? So there are different ways to do that, and that's kind of up to you. But I make sure that the clause in the inspection clause actually says that if there is an issue, we'll forward relevant portions of the report. And the reason I do that is because the report belongs to your client. So your client's probably paid $400 or $500 for this thing. And if they do have a question or they want something changed, sending a $500 document to the seller does not make sense. So sending the relevant portions does make sense. So you'll send, let's say it's the roof, the chimney, whatever it is, you say, here it is, you send the portions. And then kind of you and the agent for the sellers can kind of go back and forth. And it's the same in reverse. If you're the listing agent, you can go back and forth and talk about what's reasonable. And kind of, it's our job to sort of get the clients to see things from the other side. So we can't really make the decision for them, but it would be understandable that if you didn't know your roof was leaking and you have an offer, if that offer doesn't come together, you now know that your roof is leaking. So you're probably gonna have to do something about it either way. And so why not kind of go down this path? So the other thing is, when we're going through that inspection report, I try to prep my clients in advance because it can be daunting. These things are 71 pages long and they're like, oh my goodness, like this, like, oh, this whole house is falling apart. And if the whole house is falling apart, absolutely, like, you know what, maybe it's not the right one, but like every house has things. So the inspector is going to kind of list all the things because that's their job. I always very much appreciate inspectors that give the whole picture. Like don't gloss over anything, because the clients need to make an informed decision. This is a big investment. So is it manageable? Can you handle it? Like if the roof is leaking and the roof is fixed, cool. But I've also been in houses where like, the house is sinking. So that's not good. But it's good to know, and for you to go through with the client and say, okay, these are the biggest things. And at the end of the inspection, the inspector will also go through what they thought were the biggest things. So that helps. What I would say is not a good practice is to kind of negotiate and agree on a price, go through the inspection, and then kind of take a bunch of small things and try to get a way lower price. Like there's nothing, I guess, wrong with it, but when you look at kind of integrity and negotiating, I mean, you want to be negotiating in good faith. And we've had people before where there were things that they could clearly see, and then they had this list that included like recaulking the counter in the kitchen. And it was it's at some point you kind of realize like maybe they just don't want the house. So I would say like reasonable asks are good. And sometimes, you know what, like ultimately try to not get emotionally involved in that part of the negotiation. Like we are the professionals. So if we're getting upset before we even talk to our client, that doesn't help anybody either. And it's important, like we're the ones, like if your client's freaking out because something broke, talk with them. Let's figure out a solution. We are the one kind of driving the bus. And if we're freaking out too, then that's not good. And the other thing, so really, really awesome piece. So one of my home inspectors is, he used to be an electrician, but he has a really cool way of helping people through an inspection. And he does this thing, and I always laugh because, he really like drills it into people, these 4 things you have to know about your house. And it's actually helped me too, just being there. So the first thing, if he were here, he would laugh because I'm going to get them wrong. But the first thing is the furnace switch. So for some reason, someone way back when decided it would be a great idea to make a furnace on-off switch look like a light switch. And usually it's in a spot where a light switch might be. So the number one thing he always says is make sure that is on. So if it's the winter and it's freezing and it's the middle of the night and your furnace stops working, make sure that is switched on. Because if somehow someone turned it off for you thinking they were turning off a light for you, is going to be very expensive for someone to come over and just flip that switch. So then the other thing is to make sure you know how to turn off the water for the house and how to turn off the hot water tank water if it's leaking. And if it's a rental, you call the rental company. But the idea is to make sure you can turn off the water at the house. There's also the smoke detector and carbon monoxide detectors. So if that thing goes off, you always want to make sure that you, first of all, get out of the house, call 911. But it's also important to know that you need to have updated smoke detectors, updated carbon monoxide detectors. Make sure you're changing your furnace filter. And I will say there are four things, and I've only said 3. So my apologies to my home inspector. This is important for clients, and I probably should write them down. But what's nice is that he goes over it, and then they learn how to do something in an emergency. So in a situation, if your smoke detector goes off, or if something is leaking, or if the furnace is off, things like that, like all of a sudden you have this wonderful memory that's been drilled into your head that you can deal with it in an emergency. And that's kind of one of the reasons I like that home inspector. I've also had other home inspectors, they'll put little tags on things and show people kind of where's the water shut off and what does this do and what does that do. Because when you get a new house, learning it takes a while, but in an emergency, if you haven't learned it yet, you might end up with a really expensive issue. So those are my tips for being at an inspection. So be quiet, get the report, share a portion of it, help the client absorb the list, and remember the main things that people need to know in an emergency. And those are very, very important. And I think actually those were 4. One was shut off the water and one was shut off the hot water tank, or call the rental company if it's a rental. So I am Krystal Lee Moore Lucier, your Home Sweet Home 519 Realtor, and I hope this was helpful. Thanks for being here. Have a great day.